Welcome to Talk Ottumwa, a production of Greater Ottumwa Partners in Progress. On this podcast, we'll talk about the local businesses in Ottumwa to give you the backstory to their success. We'll also talk about the economic initiatives that are driving the progress of the community, and we'll talk about the issues that the community faces and much more. So stick around and let's talk Ottumwa. Welcome to another episode of Talk Ottumwa, and in this episode we will continue on with a series of mental health, and today I have with me Amy Nossaman with the Ottumwa Legacy Foundation. How's it going, Amy?
Great.
And you have an interesting group that you work with called the Legacy Youth Alliance.
Yes, and actually it's one of my favorite days of the month when we meet. This is a group of high school students. We meet once a month throughout the school year. So our first meeting will be in September, and then we usually close out in May. Just depends on how many graduates I have and how many kids will be leaving. And they actually are allowed to meet during the school day, because in working with the administrators of each of the schools, they saw it as a really great leadership development program.
Okay. And you said this program was started in the fall of 2017. Can you take me back in time just a little bit and explain where the idea of the Legacy Youth Alliance came from and really what the goal of that organization or group was in the beginning?
At the time, actually, I was part of the Community Foundation in Mahaska County. And across the state, community foundations were encouraged to have a youth philanthropy component. But most people that are part of a community foundation are volunteers, and they don't really have the time to give to a youth philanthropy component that it demands to be successful. So when I started with the Legacy Foundation in May of 2016, I posed the idea to Brad Little, the then CEO, and Kelly Jenners, and they were excited about it. And so I went back and I did a lot of research I talked with people who currently lead a youth philanthropy group. I talked with adults that were part of a youth philanthropy group, getting all those benefits and learning how each one of the groups around the state are set up. Everyone's the same but different. So I had, this big notebook full of research, and when I went to the Legacy Board of Directors to pose it, I really didn't need all that research. They too were very, very excited about it and have supported me wholeheartedly since then, both giving me the opportunity and the time to devote to it, but also giving me financial support to make the program happen.
Fantastic. So through the formation of it, what were the goals really of the Youth Alliance? What did you see the end game for that being?
It's actually changed from what I thought it was going to be when I started it. When I first started, I thought I'm going to teach these high school kids about philanthropy. There is a lot that goes into it, and trying to make them understand that what they probably picture in their head when they hear the word philanthropy usually is older, white, rich men. And talking about philanthropy is more than money. It's giving of their time, their talent, and also their treasure. So, going in and teaching them all of that, and then giving them the tools and support to support those organizations and projects that they care about. Because as adults, we think we know what they want, but we really, really don't.
There's going to be a lot of adults that are really disappointed to hear that.
To hear that, yeah. But interestingly enough, over the years, I learned so much more from them than they learned from me.
That seems to be the case when you're working with kids as a general rule.
Yeah.
So that really kind of brings us, talking about what's important to them, that really kind of brings us to the full circle of the point of this podcast series. We had one of the teens, Abby Yeager, that was in the studio here not too long ago, that the issue that's predominantly important, it appears now, is mental health with the students. And she didn't hold any bones in saying that this project with the Youth Alliance was really what drove her to have the desire to go out and make a difference. So how did that conversation start with the Youth Alliance at that point in time, where mental health really became a focus for the students, and how has that progressed?
So the process with my students, about every 2 years, we do a needs assessment. So I give them the statistics on the community, whether it's the graduation rates in their schools, whether it's our health ranking, which Ottumwa is very low or high, depending on how you look at that. I think we're 94th out of 99 counties now.
That means we're winning.
Yeah, yeah. And they get to choose what they feel is important and what they want their funding priority to be, or their funding priorities. And for the most part, it stayed the same. It was early childhood literacy, post-secondary training or education or apprenticeship, but something post-secondary, and then just generally youth health, which is physical, emotional, social, and mental. Then comes COVID, and the statistics there on depression, what was already existing in some teens and actually elementary, just skyrocketed from COVID, and it really hasn't really changed even after returning to school. So the next year we come back from COVID, and they want to make youth mental health a funding priority. And what that means is it's not that they won't fund other projects, but those that come in that have to do with youth mental health are going to get that, extra leg up because it's focused on mental health. And then last year, so the fall of 2022, our first meeting in September, we're talking about, do we need to change our funding priorities? And they were like, no, youth mental health is still very, very much an issue at our schools. And where my role in this group is really to be a mentor and a guide. I don't make any of their decisions for them unless the auditor, would get mad. So I keep them legal on that aspect. But what makes this a successful program is it is their program. They make all the decisions. They tell me what they want to learn more about each month. They decide what are their funding priorities. They decide what are the concerns in the communities or in their schools that they want to address with the money that they receive from the board of directors.
So I just want to interject here really quick. You're talking about decisions that are being made by a group of students that a lot of adults aren't even making.
Yeah.
Can you give us a little bit of a 10,000-foot view of what your group actually looks like? Because I think that's really impressive when you think about that.
Yeah. So it is made up of students that live in Wapello County and that attend any one of the high schools. I currently have Cardinal, Pekin, Eddyville, Blakesburg, Ottumwa, and a homeschool student.
So we're talking youngins.
Yeah.
Freshmen.
From 9th grade through 12th grade.
And how long can they actually stay in the program?
They can stay as long as they are in high school.
And you typically have a lot of people that are returning year after year?
I do, yes. Most of my students start as sophomores and stay through their senior year.
Okay. And how many do you have in your program right now?
I have 14. I've had upwards of 17, but that gets a little unruly on occasion. Okay. So we've decided between 12 and 15 is a good size group.
And looking at the schools themselves, are the schools receptive to this?
Absolutely. Like I said, when I first started it, now some of the administration has changed. OHS has a different superintendent and principal. Cardinal has a different superintendent. Pekin has a different superintendent. But they all they learn right away about the program, and they love the opportunity for the youth that are part of it. And they also benefit because then they can apply for grants as well.
To my understanding, as a result of some of the work that you and the Youth Alliance have done, in conjunction with at least the Ottumwa School District, there's a new room that's being put in this year, as a matter of fact, specific to mental health. Would you mind talking about that for just a second?
Sure, I will. You want me to tell you how we got to that point?
I would love that.
Okay. So once the youth decided that that mental health was still really a challenge and an issue, the students actually asked me specifically to invite their counselors for a dialogue. And so where usually they just say, we want to learn about, dating violence, or we want to learn more about substance abuse. This was the first time they specifically wanted someone specific to come in and talk.
Which is a huge step.
And so I was a little nervous because they are a very passionate group, and you never know how that conversation is going to go. But it was a wonderful 2 hours. The 3 counselors that were able to attend came to listen, and they talked back and forth, and a couple of things. The counselors learned a couple of things from the group, and one main thing was that there is no quiet space that students can retreat to during the day. It used to be libraries. When I was in high school, the library was the quiet space. They're not.
No. I've been there on a couple of visits / business engagements, and they are not the same libraries that I went to school in.
And so while elementary students, when they get overwhelmed or start to feel anxious, they usually have a sensory space they can go to while they're learning to be able to handle those kind of emotions. And they expect by high school that these students can manage it. Well, they can, but they still need a place to go to be able to decompress. And one thing was happening is that students were going to the bathrooms and crying in the stalls because it was semi-private for them to work through whatever feelings they were having at the moment. And so the counselors, found out there needs to be a space at the high school level for these kids to be able to go to. And so the counselors that were there were Michelle Edwards from Cardinal Schools, Colby Strebe from OHS, and Amy Spurgeon from EBF. Cardinal and Eddyville have zero space. They don't even have a janitor's closet, but they have started to make their counseling space as nice and comfortable and welcoming as they can. And OHS, in all of their shuffling now with students changing schools and certain schools having certain grades, there was some space at OHS. And we connected them with another group in the state called Brain Health Now. And Brain Health Now is another private foundation, And they have worked in the Dubuque school systems to put in these retreat rooms, these brain health rooms. And so as a convener, Legacy Foundation pulled together Brain Health Now, South Central Iowa Behavioral Health, and us, and talked about what we would need to make this space at OHS. Because Brain Health Now had some space restrictions that they wanted to require. They also require a full-time master's level counselor in that room.
At all times?
At all times, because the place, it's not a place for kids to come and hang out. It's a place where kids that need to work through something, whether that's test anxiety or they've just gotten overstimulated after being in the lunchroom or whatever that happens to be. They come in, they do what they need to do to work through those feelings, and then they go back to class. Okay. It's not a place to just hang out.
Are there other schools that have these in place now? And if so, is there either anecdotal or documented evidence that these spaces are actually working for the kids?
They are. There's 2 Dubuque schools. It's Dubuque-Wahlert and Dubuque-Hempstead that have the spaces. And when they gave us their statistics, it was pretty astounding how many students were using it. But then they also had some quantitative or qualitative data about, well, yes, I used to go into the brain or the bathroom stall and cry through things, but then they also have staff using it as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So yes, those are the kind of the success stories and on that mental health side of things.
Okay. One of the things through conversations with Abby, who was on the podcast, when we're talking about mental health specifically, there was the conversation that came up, and then it came up again with Colby Strebe as well, is community acceptance of mental health. And, we've come a long way in the last several years, but clearly there's still a long way to go. Is that a common theme that you hear from the students specifically when they're talking about mental health, is a stigma that's attached to mental health awareness in schools?
Yeah. When we were talking with the counselors, 2 things came up. One was, if I have a regular visit with the counselor, everybody sees me get up out of class and I go and I'm gone 20 minutes. And I come back to class, and they know where I've been and why I've been there. And so having more availability came up with in the discussion a lot. The other piece that came up was that when a student is in crisis, they need to see a counselor now, not make an appointment for Tuesday at 2:00 next week.
Which makes perfect sense. Mm-hmm. If you break an arm, you don't need a doctor 3 weeks from now.
Yeah. So, and I know in the Eddyville-Blakesburg school, Amy Spurgeon is at the high school full time, and then they have an elementary school counselor that has to split between Fremont, Blakesburg, and Eddyville for the grade schools. There's quite a distance between those 3 schools, and if the counselor is in Blakesburg and she or he is needed in Fremont, it becomes an issue.
Kind of switching gears a little bit, one of the things that we've heard is you're teaching these kids how to advocate for themselves.
Yeah.
And from everybody that I've talked to, it seems like a pretty proud moment that one of the things that they got to do last school year was go up and learn how to advocate for themselves at the state level with the Iowa legislature. Can you talk about that for just a second?
Yeah, and actually, when you talk about them advocating for themselves, they advocated for themselves to be able to go and advocate. So, it goes back, and that was the other piece that came out of that dialogue with the counselors was we need to go from action, we need to do more. And we need, more money at the school level for mental health, and that means talking to our legislators. And so I did a little bit of research, and there's a group called NAMI, which is the National Alliance on Mental Illness. And NAMI, Iowa has a day every year called NAMI Day on the Hill. It is normally attended by professionals that work within the mental health sector. And so the Stomp Out Stigma group was actually the applicant, and they applied to the Legacy Youth Alliance for grant dollars to bring several high school students up to the NAMI Day on the Hill. And it's an all-day event, and you get together in the morning, and the very first breakout session is for new people to advocacy, and they learned how to talk with their legislators and what they needed to do, and what the process was when they got to the Capitol, because you only have maybe 5 minutes.
If you're lucky.
If you're lucky, if you can even get them to come out.
That's the other thing.
And so you have to have a really impactful story. And so they learned how to do that, and they practiced it. And, who played what role? One was the introducer, one was the storyteller, one was the person that closed it out and did the ask. Like, so will you vote for House File 1111 or whatever it happens to be? And so then the afternoon after lunch, we actually went to the Capitol. And I really should back up, because how I said at this event, they're all mostly practitioners. And 45 students walked in. And the adults were just like, oh my gosh, there's all these kids. And they were, astounded that there was this group of kids that cared enough about what was going on to come up and use their voice to make a difference. And so that right there was very attention-getting. And then when you get to the Capitol, and if you've never been there, it's very, very busy, full of adults, again, lobbyists, they're professional, wheelers and dealers kind of people. And then you've got this group of kids that are up there. And the group that I was with did get Sherry Lynn Westridge, Senator Westridge, to come out of the Senate and talk to them. And again, she gave them more time, because she was first, that these youth were here talking to her. So +1 in their favor. And then to hear why they were there and what they were concerned about. And then she got called back in for a vote. And so she's just like, stay here. I got to go in. I got to vote. I'm going to come back out, and we're going to finish this conversation.
Good for her.
So, she came out and talked to them more about it. And so that just really sparked the kids. It gave them that feeling of, these people are listening to me.
Right.
And that's really what's important. I mean, they'll talk all day, but if you're not listening to them, or if they don't feel that they're being heard, then they're not gonna.
Yeah, they'll check out.
Exactly.
And, for the listeners out there, I just want to put this into perspective, because I've went up and lobbied myself at the Capitol building, and I still, to this day, remember the very first time I did it. It's to everything that you said, it's very loud. There's so much going on around you, and you are very intimidated being in that building. So even as somebody who probably talks way too much and is used to talking to people, that was an extremely stressful thing for me to do. I can't imagine how much stress it would have been for those kiddos to go up there and do that and be able to pull it off successfully. It says really a lot about the character of those kids.
Yes.
I think that people say that our kids nowadays, this new generation, and I think it goes generation to generation. Every new generation's the worst generation. But, for all of the people that say, these kids aren't taking care of themselves, they're not getting out and getting active. That's wrong.
It is wrong.
So how do kids find out, or parents, whoever, how do they find out about your program?
So we do a call for applicants usually right after school ends. So about June 1st, we posted it out on Facebook. Lots of shares and that. But then my current students as well. I mean, what better salesman than to have them say, you know what, Mark, I think you would really like this program, and tell them about it. I have to do very little recruitment now. I mean, every year I used to have to go and talk to the tag teachers or whatever and say, hey, you got a couple of students that you think would be a good fit for this. And then I got away from tag. And I said, I really want those kids that aren't that top tier. They already have unlimited opportunities to be that star or whatever. I want that next tier that has potential. They just haven't been given the opportunity yet to. Because I'll give you an example. Kara Galloway. So she has spoken to my group probably every other year. And I had her one year when I had a young man from EBF who he's a big kid. He's very tall and broad, very football player-ish. And as a freshman or a sophomore, he came in and she said when I first spoke, he sat in the middle of the room and did everything he could to make himself be small, because he's just this big kid. And then they spoke to us last year, and he was at the end of the table and he was sitting up and he was the leader. He was a senior, and he awesome. to just say how much difference the 2 years in this program has made for him. It also changed his mind on his major. Okay. He's very much science and math oriented. He was going to be an actuary, and he changed his mind, and he is now getting a psychology degree, double majoring with Spanish.
Speaking of which, what does the demographic outlook appear to be for the Youth Alliance?
We are also very purposeful in that too, because as with our adult grant programs, the groups should have a good cross section of what our community looks like or what our schools look like. And so we've done some things towards the end of the year when we're thinking about recruitment, and I show them the demographics of what we look like now. These are the grades in your graduation years. These are your gender identity. These are, the extracurricular activities you do. Who are we missing? And how do we reach out to those individuals? So I have a couple of Hispanic Latino students. I have an African American student. I actually he's new, so September will be his first meeting, a young man who's been in the country for just about a year from Myanmar.
Okay, cool. That seems like a pretty good cross-section of the community. You only have about 20 more languages to go.
Actually, I think there's 54.
Okay, 50. Yeah, 50 more to go. You're setting the bar higher for yourself.
Yeah, and that's a big group, so.
So what do you think, looking forward, number one, what do you see this group looking like, 2 or 3 years from now? But the Legacy Foundation, what do you see their role being in this 2 or 3 years from now as well?
Every year I have a group graduate, and I'm like, I don't know how I'm ever going to replace these kids. They're just so awesome. And then I get a new group of kids, and they may shine in a different light than the year before, but they come up and they just figure things out. And so I see this next year, our advocacy is continuing. We are speaking to all sorts of different groups. They have spoke at a couple of different state conferences, the CASA conference and also the State Youth Philanthropy Conference. And out of that, there are a couple of groups across the state who want to learn more, happen to be Abby and Nevaeh Vandalo. And I'm sure they'll connect on Zoom for one of their meetings to talk further about how they're advocating for youth mental health. We're actually asking for a proclamation from the City Council and the Mayor in September, and that will be a whole new learning leadership experience for them. There's a lot of protocol that goes along with addressing the City Council, and so they will be doing that. And then the next year we might continue on with that, or there might be a new concern that rises to the top, and the new group wants to really address something different. It's really up to them.
In a perfect world, it would be a new concern because we wouldn't have to worry about mental health anymore. But
Yeah.
that would be like the perfect situation. So.
Yeah, but I think with what they've done in the last year, they have really increased the awareness, and the fact that they've made a difference in the spaces that they and their environment while they're in school. That means the schools are listening and saying, okay, it must really be a concern that we need to look further at.
Right.
So, they feel good about the fact that they are making a difference.
What is it that you want anybody to know about either the Youth Alliance, the students, or mental health, or anything wrapping around this conversation?
Yeah, I guess I would like a couple of things. One, I have 14 awesome high school students, but they're not the only 14 awesome high school students. And I think there's so many organizations that serve our community, that serve youth. They need to have youth on their boards or on a committee, because, like I said, as adults, we think we know what they want, we think they know what they care about, but we really don't. And so you really need to, there's that saying, and everybody's probably heard it at least once, is nothing about me without me. So, I would encourage the organizations, especially those that serve youth, to get youth on board. And don't just do it to check a box, but really listen to them. The ones I have, if they don't have anything to say or they really don't care about it, they'll tell you that as well. But they do have concerns, and they're not the same as adults have. And so I think we need to be letting them participate in our decision making.
That's fair. Well, this has been a good conversation, and I'm hoping everybody gathered just a little bit of information. Is there somebody that we can, if a parent or another student does want to reach out and get information about the Legacy Youth Alliance, who do they contact? You?
Me, yep.
Okay.
So they can look on our website, which is www.ottumwalegacy.org. The application is out there, the link to the application. But if they really just want to learn more about the group, what we do, what we learn about, they can give me a call as well, or email me. My phone number is 641-455-5260. Amy Nossaman at ottumwalegacy.org.
Awesome. And we'll put that link in the description of the podcast as well. All right. Well, Amy, thank you for coming in today.
You're welcome.
And again, if anybody has any questions, you can either contact Amy directly or visit the Ottumwa Legacy Foundation website. All right. Stick around for the next great episode of Talk Ottumwa.